Welcome to Disrupt TV, live from Davos 2017. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and Disrupt TV co-host. Follow us on Twitter at Disrupt TV Show, and please send your questions using hashtag Disrupt TV, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Ray Wong, best-selling author of Disrupting Digital Business, CEO, co-founder of Constellation Research, and a columnist for Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and ZDNet. You can follow Ray on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray, from Davos.
Hey, what's up, Vala? And my co-host, Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce, #1 CIO influencer, CMO influencer, and of course on HuffPo. So you can follow Vala at VALAAFSHAR. So very cool. But more importantly, we've got two other awesome co-hosts here. We've got Naveen here, and we've got Alan out there. I'm going to ask the first question and jump into one of the hot issues that are here at Davos, which is really about the future of work and AI. We're hearing a lot about AI these days as it refers back to what's going on with the way people work. And it's a very important point that we keep hearing about. And Alan, can you talk a little bit about what's going on with AI, future of work, and given your research?
Sure thing. Thanks, Ray, and hope you're enjoying your time there. You're right. It's all we're hearing about these days. Everyone wants to talk about artificial intelligence and what does it mean and the impact it's going to have on employees. And it's really interesting if you sort of start to cut through the hype and the marketing and the buzzwords and focus on what is this going to mean for employees? What's it going to mean for organizations? What do CXOs have to think about for their staff? You start to find those real use cases. It's not about self-driving cars. That's the commercial side of AI. But for employees, you have to think about how overloaded people are these days. Overloaded with not just information, not just the quantity of information, but the number of places information is coming from. Your mail and calendar and social networks and Twitter and LinkedIn and chat rooms and all of these different places. And so what AI can hopefully do for employees is help relieve that burden of having to sort of sift through information, filter information, prioritize information, find the context around information. All of those sort of manual steps we have to do in order to get ourselves through the day are things that AI are going to be able to help employees deal with. That's just kind of at the top level. Sort of the next level deep is how can these AIs start to help people with job-specific functions? What can people do around sales and marketing and engineering and HR? How can we map recruiting better to the needs of a company? How can we onboard people better? How can salespeople know who they should follow up with? How can marketing people know which campaigns are doing well? So there's a whole bunch of things that can sort of happen around that future of work. But I do want to make kind of one bigger point about this. I've just spent the last kind of minute or so talking about how can AI change the processes we do today, our email, our calendar, our sales, our marketing. But what's really, really exciting about AI is where can it take us that we don't know about today? How can we think bigger than just having AI sort of augment our existing processes? So if you think about it, when transportation started, it wasn't all about how do we make faster feet. It was about creating bicycles and then cars and then buses and then trains, boats or submarines, airplanes or helicopters or rocket ships. All of these mechanical things allow us to do things we can't do today. Fly, go underwater, go to space. That's not just augmenting us, that's giving us new capabilities. And I'm really excited to see what 1, 3, 5, 10 years from now are going to be the brand new capabilities that people have at work, not just improving what we do today.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, Alan. We had Kai Fu Lee at the FT Wipro dinner last night, and what he was talking about is these different types of work patterns that are emerging, and it's replacing a small part of work, and the level of complexity will increase over time. But there's certain things that humans can do, right? Like we have emotions, and we can be creative, and we have arts, and those are things that machines aren't going to do for quite some time, which makes a lot of sense. Sorry, Val, I cut you off there. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Alan. Any thoughts with what Ray just mentioned?
Absolutely. You know, we always talk about the sort of creative and emotional aspect of artificial intelligence. And it's interesting. It's not just the human spirit that can create those things. We're actually starting to see programs that can draw. We're starting to see programs that can compose music. We're seeing programs that can actually write scripts for movies. But what they can't do, even though they can create that tangible thing, say it can paint, it still can't connect with its audience. We still need humans to shake hands, to hug, to talk, to have conversation. If we had 4 robotic AIs 5 years from now doing this show, it wouldn't be as interactive as the 4 of us are going to be today. It's still too scripted. It's not spontaneous. There's no passion or emotion there. So humans aren't going away anytime soon. Sci-fi be damned. I think we're okay for a while.
Well, I would say I'm probably the first to be replaced if it's Ray and I, and I'm okay with that. We are speaking with Alan Lepofsky, Vice President, Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. I would strongly urge all business executives across all lines of business to follow Alan on Twitter at Alan Lepo, ALAN Lepo. Alan, for 20 years, you've been working with industry leaders, helping organizations improve the way their employees work together and get the job done. Now we're talking about artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, and we know the productivity and output and results are only as good as the quality of data, the amount of data, and the algorithms that you apply. So in order for these tools to work, don't we have to give up a lot of information about ourselves? And I think I know the answer to that. And if so, what are the implications given the fact we are in a trust economy?
No, it's so you kind of, the biggest ethical question that we get asked from executives all the time, or even just end users want to know all the time. They say, these tools sound really neat, but you know, what do I have to tell them about myself in order to have them work? So let's think about it. Let's take it a step back and do the simplest use case. You know, we're talking about how can these tools help us with our email or our calendar. Okay, so you give up access to your email and your calendar to Google or Microsoft or Wipro or whoever it happens to be, and they access this information, they data crunch that information, they find trends, they find patterns, and they return that. Well, you can't get good results from 10 emails or 100 emails. You need 1,000 or 10,000. And then if you can link that to your contacts and you can link that to other sources of information, you start to get much more accurate information. So our business data, our calendar, our contacts, our chat, our files, all of that is one thing, because that's rather corporate. So even if we give up quote unquote privacy and let our tools look at that information, I don't think that's too worrisome. What I think starts to happen is when we get into the next couple levels deep. If we start to give up things like access to our graph, so graph essentially meaning, who am I connected to? What things do we have in common? Who do we know in common? What events do we go to? We start to expand out the connection points. Start to get a little bit worried about, okay, am I giving up too much privacy to get back convenience? But now let's fast forward it to like the really interesting things. What if we start to give access to our location or our mood, our heart rate, our stress levels, our blinking patterns? Like, think about the integration of IoT and cameras and sensors and Apple Watches and clothing that can monitor, you know, our stress levels. Okay, to give up in order to get more convenience back. And that's sort of the balance that I think we're going to have to really think about as we move forward. It's not one or the other. I don't think you have to give up one to get the other. It's finding the balance. And each person's balance is probably going to be different. You know, Ray, you probably want everybody to know where you are, right?
No. I'm pretty private about that.
No, but you know, Vala, it's really interesting. You know, for decades we've talked about your corporate data belongs to your company. So my company has the right to look through my email, right? You know, my business email, not my personal email. Sure. Well, what happens with something like heart rate? You know, is that something that I want my business to know about? Do I want sensors and AI to monitor my blinking rates through the cameras on my screen and things like that? So we're getting into a really interesting time where morally we're going to have to kind of decide, is life so bad? Do we need these extra features, or are we okay versus what we have to give to get them?
Makes sense.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely. Alan, we are hearing a lot of talk about, AI replacing, I mean, there's a big spectrum which talks about AI replacing humans. And up to that point, when you hear it, it feels like an innovation and, something good going on. But the moment AI starts to talk about replacing employees, especially in the service economies and connected economies, it feels like a depression. So what's your, what about it? What do you think is actually where it is headed towards, AI actually replacing employees?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and something that's on, not only just every executive's mind, from the executive standpoint, cost savings and resource allocation, but the employees themselves are certainly concerned. And, it's a double-edged sword. I think it's the same argument we've had decade after decade of any new come along. Every time there's automation or a tool that can, replace somebody, we start to worry. And each time that happens, we find that people evolve and find new sort of ancillary additional pieces to the job that they were doing, because it's still the humans that have expertise. So when we start to think about AI, learning everything there is to learn about the medical world, well, that's in order to help doctors make diagnosis, not completely replace them. When we think about AI understanding all of the structural and mechanical issues around building, it's still not going to completely replace engineers and architects. Even very manual jobs, we hear a lot about AI-controlled cars and trucks are going to replace the entire, mobile workforce, driving workforce. It would be naive for me to say, yes, some people are not going to lose jobs, but there are still extremely strong downstream positions available that have to enhance and sort of be part of that process. If an automated truck is going to deliver a package from point A to point B, you still want a human handling the relationship at the end of the delivery. You want that, tractor trailer that's delivering parts to a warehouse to still sort of interact with the person at the other end. Make sure that your business's relationship is still good with that person. So I don't think we're going to really want to offload everything to robots and artificial intelligence and software. We still need experience. People have the experience. People have, as Ray was saying, the emotions. And most importantly, people can handle exceptions to processes that AI sometimes, or at least currently, isn't able to do. It's really good at knowing what it knows, but people are really good at instinctively and intuitively problem solving. And, we've been doing it since the dawn of man, and creating fire and tools, we problem solve. And I don't foresee that being something that we're going to replace anytime soon. What about your guys' perspective? You obviously do lots of services work. Tell us what your thoughts are on this.
Well, in terms of Naveen's thoughts on this? Okay, go ahead.
Sure, I'd love to hear.
Can you repeat your question?
No, I'm just saying, from a services perspective, I would love to learn from you guys about, what you're thinking about where this sort of stands for employees as well.
I think there's again, it's I completely agree. There are certain jobs where definitely there's going to be more automation. The AI is definitely going to take over. But then I think the vision is getting a lot clearer in terms of where AI is going to augment humans in terms of letting them do more, probably that's where I feel it gives a little bit time where, people can get retrained and people can get to, I don't think, what is not going to happen is that aesthetics is not going to replace beauty, as you talked about.
Right.
And that's an important. I think that's a point which I see that with AI as well. There are areas where we're going to see that there's going to be a lot more automation, but then there are areas where we clearly see the augmentation of AI can really help. It can definitely lead to consolidation of good business processes. I mean, just look at out there, with our with many of the institutions and customers in terms of the help they need. People talk about it, but how much it is down there into the system, I think it's not going to be easy, because again, you are going to deal with humans at some level.
Hey, Alan, and related to this, it's like a lot of things that we're trying to do here isn't new, but why is AI taking over? I mean, why is it, moving beyond science fiction and getting us to a different point in terms of, thinking about all these possibilities as well as things that scare the crap out of us?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of the articles and the hype and how much buzz there is around AI is always sort of offset by, but AI has been around since the 50s and the 60s. Why are we talking about it again now? And, I think, at Constellation, we sort of have a framework, Ray, you and I have worked on that outlines 5 key elements that are sort of why AI is happening today. The first, and Vala mentioned it a little while ago, is data. The number one thing that you have to make this work is huge amounts of data sets. You have to have access to all those medical records. You have to have access to engineering charts. You have to have access to, my email and my calendar, whatever it happens to be, my social media. Ray, I think your social media account alone would constitute enough data for AI to be able to come up with some answers. But, in the 50s and 60s and even 10, 20 years ago, we didn't have access to all of that amount of data that was being created. Now, you've got the data. What do you do with it? Like, how do you process it? You need huge computing power. That's number 2. And in the 50s and 60s and onward, when we're talking about AI initially, not everybody could have a Cray computer in their basement. But now it's very easy for everybody to have cloud services with unlimited and unscalable, or no limit to the scalability, I should say, not unscalable. You take all that data, and then you have massive computing power that can actually find the trends and the data and the patterns and things like that. So how does the data and the computing power do it? You need the science, you need the algorithms, you need the math. So the third part is that algorithm. We have such expertise now in industry verticals, medical, engineering, pharmaceutical, finance, things like that, that these scientists can program the algorithms to do much more advanced things than they used to be able to do in the past. It's a very different set of algorithms that look at finding patterns in legal information than the one that's looking at things in medical x-rays, for example. So I think, the third aspect is that science behind. You have the data, you have the computing power, and then you have to have the science to actually look at them. And then the last 2 are, the second most important thing is time. One thing we haven't said yet on this call about artificial intelligence and what makes something AI is that it learns. It's better. That's kind of the definition. Everything else is just a computer program. But AI code sort of on its own gets better. And so time is critical, because if something's going to learn and get better, the faster you get started, the bigger advance you have over your competition. So for the CXOs that are out there thinking about this right now, start training your data, the faster you're going to have sort of those cycles that come back and sort of improve the algorithms. And then finally, the biggest change in things is the user experience. We are so being freed from the confines of the old vision of applications. We are speaking to things in natural language. We're getting results back. The simplest example is you no longer on your mobile phone go hunt down the weather channel icon, click on it, enter your location, and then get a result. Now you just say, phone, what's it like outside? So that natural language processing and the chat bots or the user experience that brings it back is really different than we had in 60s, 70s, not even 90s and 10 years ago. So
absolutely,
those things kind of come together. Vala, what are your thoughts on that?
Just like Facebook and Twitter brought collaboration from the consumer side into the business, just like the iPhone arguably introduced and launched a bring your own device mobile revolution into business, and the wearable technologies are bringing IoT into corporate wellness programs into the business. I think the fact that Amazon went from 1,000 commands to 7,000 commands in one year, where there is a movement to voice. The consumer side, these indispensable apps that we use like Netflix and Spotify and Amazon and Facebook facial recognition, it's the consumer side that has had the advantage of being powered by AI technologies. So all this machine learning, deep learning, things that make us love the consumer apps that are in our homes and our work, that's what's being driven into the business. I want to talk to my CRM to know which prospects I should be calling today. I want intelligent email, intelligent calendaring. So I believe it's just a consumer revolution, yet another example of what we experience at home from a virtual assistant type. And we say, why can't I have that at work? I want a virtual assistant to help me market better, service better, sell better. So it's just, it's a gravitational force that'll come, and it can't be denied, because ultimately it's more than just about productivity. And my final thoughts are, I think people should be, in the near term, more worried about being replaced by people that use AI to do their job versus robots. So data-driven talent is going to rise to the top. So my final question to you, Alan, is what are your focus areas researching for calendar 2017? It's not just WEF and Davos that's talking to AI. NRF this week, it's all about AI in the retail industry. But tell us what you're thinking about in terms of future of work, collaboration, and the intersection of all these emerging technologies.
You nailed it. I think if we think of them as silos, it's kind of limiting. What I'm looking at is, okay, great. Everyone's talking about artificial intelligence, but last year we were all talking about IoT. You know, let's not let IoT go away. Let's talk about how can all of the information and data from all of those sensors, not just in machines, you know, there's sensors in cars and planes and manufacturing lines and all of these examples, but what about the next generation of sensors on us, in our glasses, in our shoes, in our jackets, in our umbrellas, you know, in the billboards that we walk by, you know, everything that is going to be kind of bringing data into that world that the AI can then look at. And then the dramatic change in the output styles we're going to have. It's not our mobile phones and our tablets. And we can talk about artificial reality and virtual reality and augmented reality and these things. Think about giant flexible screens and screens built into your clothing and holograms and augmented reality. All of these things are converging. IoT, artificial intelligence, and brand new input and outputs of information are going to combine to make our work experience dramatically different than they've been in the past. I think over the last decade, you know, the trends we've looked at, cloud and social and mobile, they've been interesting and they've been exciting. But how different is your life right now than it was a few years ago? Okay, cloud, great. For the architecture in the background is great. But for the end user, I don't know if my files are on my hard drive or in the cloud. Mobile definitely has had an impact. We have access to everything wherever we go. But this new world of sensor data, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence doing digital assistants and talking to our CRM, that is going to change the way we work. If you think the last decade has been new, the next decade is so exciting about what's going to happen.
All right.
That's awesome. You know, we are having the biggest party at 6,000 feet on AI, at 6,000 feet above the sea level on AI. Do you think, is there a real reason to be excited about it? Alan?
We're not going backwards.
But is there a real reason to be excited about it?
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't a trend. This isn't just hype. This is the next generation of all of the software and services that are going to be delivered. Is the hype beyond the reality right now? Yeah, it's very easy to say these tools are going to do everything for us. They're not. But we're already starting to see tools today that can schedule meetings for us, that can prioritize our tasks, that can link together social media accounts to, you know, files that you're sharing. AI is really here. You know, doctors are getting access to information they never had before. Pharmaceutical companies are able to, you know, image things that they could never do before. Yeah. You know, I look at the simplest example, just photo recognition. The ability for AI, you know, insert whichever vendor you want, Microsoft, IBM, Google, Salesforce, whoever it is, the ability for people to find and detect images inside photos, that alone is game-changing enough for me for 2017 and 2018. Just the applications we can do with just looking at what's inside an image can spur industries for the next 5 years. Then we can move on to the next thing.
Wow. Hey,
Yeah.
Alan, thank you so much for being here. AI has been a big topic that's been dominating here at Davos. And one of the things that we can then do is jump in and have you come back as other pieces evolve here at Davos. Please follow Alan Lepofsky at ALANLEPO on Twitter to catch up on the latest on future of work and AI. Thanks a lot, Alan.
You're very
Thanks,
welcome.
Alan.
You guys have a great show. I wish I was there with you.
Oh, no problem. This is great. So, and Vala, hey, you know, let's give you a quick rundown of what's going on here. But what are some things that you're getting and hearing about that people want to know about what's happening here live at Davos?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we sign off, to answer Naveen's question, there's now 1,535 active AI startups that have raised over 10 billion in funding. Yeah. So when you watch the VC space in terms of their interest, undoubtedly it's shaping up to be the definitive technology for not just the next couple of years, but the next several decades. So I want to know, you two rock stars have been hanging around with, you know, major analysts like Edelman, you know, you in the same room as the president of China and Forrest Whitaker. So you guys are from, so let's start talking. Let me know a little bit about Edelman Trust Barometer. Talk to me a little bit about the president of China's visit, and, you know, talking about trade implications moving forward. And then, of course, Forrest Whitaker.
Hey, you know, those are awesome topics. But hey, Naveen, let's start with what happened at the FT Wipro dinner. Who was there last night?
Well, we had, of course, Ariana Huffington. Apart from our CEO, Abid Ali Nimachwala, we had Kai-Fu Lee, you know, CEO of Innovation Ventures, just an amazing, amazing guy. We had Charles Holliday, or Chad Holliday, he goes by, who was the chairman of Royal Dutch Shell. And we had Andy Welch, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of AB InBev. So we had a pretty, and a panel was chaired by Tim Bradshaw. Very broad spectrum of views in terms of how they ranged and talk about, you know, in terms of the reality of AI and what AI could do and what it means. But I think the best part is, you know, although the views are divergent, all the views in a spectrum start to make some sense. You know, it has the meaning of a spectrum. It's not like, you know, we need to be doing AI or not doing AI or what it will do, but it is like, you know, everything holds true. So that's the interesting, you know, pattern we are seeing here at Davos this time. In fact.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very exciting. And then this morning we were at the Edelman event where they unveiled their 17th annual Trust Barometer. Think about that. They put out a survey for 17 years. And the beauty of the survey is it showed all the things that we knew. And one of the things that Richard Edelman pointed out to everybody was that, you know, last year, like, there's massive unrest, it's coming. Nobody was paying attention to him. This year, he's like, there's massive discontent. CEOs need to step up. And I'm not sure a single soul understood what he was saying about this lack of trust that's happening in the marketplace. And we've used this Trust Barometer a long time. And back in the social media days, we're like, you know, people trust peers, right? Peers just like you were the most important folks. And so that was part of the stuff that we're coming back to. And the problem is this year, we trust fake news. I mean, we listen to the stories that we get excited about. And he's trying to warn everybody that CEOs are like the last institution that's going to save the world. They have to defend themselves. And then, of course, the big theme here has been responsive and responsible leadership, and everyone's been working there. But
I think what's coming out from that, you know, Trust Barometer, one of the interesting points I picked up from there was that, you know, every business leader, every manager, so to say, you know, we call in the organizational hierarchy chain, traditional organizations need to run for an office. I mean, you know, they need to behave as if they are running for the office. Essentially, you know, the people around you, the horizontal system around you is so important for you, you know, to be able to vote for you and say that, you know, you are the right leader we want to work with. I think that has become very, very important. That trust equation has become all the more important. That's just
yeah, and it is.
I tell you, from my point of view, and I'm not just saying that because you're gracious enough to be on DisrupTV, you exemplify responsive and responsible leadership, because as a CMO of nearly a 200,000 employee company, global company, look how accessible you are. People can send a tweet to you at Nuveen, N-U-V-E-N, and you respond, and sometimes in real time. So the fact that you're accessible, the fact that you care about every stakeholder at every level in the organization and the broader ecosystem, that to me exemplifies the leadership needed in the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah, and one of the things that you saw in the report that we put out about responsive and responsible leadership, around dynamic leadership, you can look at it on the blog at constellationr.com. But the important piece about this was the fact that there are some immutable core traits that you have to have in leadership. And these traits don't go away. Integrity, getting people inspired to talk to you, having the level of, just transparency and authenticity. Those become very important. And then there's things that you have to balance. And I think that's what leaders are going to have to figure out at Davos. So, and then the last thing that we saw was kind of fun. Forrest Whitaker. That was great. So yeah, Forrest Whitaker was sharing a story about his mission, his humanitarian work, and I think that brought some realism back to Davos.
Yeah, and especially his career. How he started. From the sports scholarship to music scholarship to getting into movie world, and from there. The program.
He built his own NGO. He built an NGO.
He built an NGO. Without people knowing, and a significant change in Africa because of that.
Yeah.
That is
very touching stories.
We need more people like this who are going to roll up their sleeves and get stuff done. I think at Davos, the criticism is still real. We're walking around, people are still shocked. Like, people revolted. We're out of power. We have no influence. And I'm sitting here like, duh, come and go take a trip instead of to a third world country and go see the rest of your country and bridge the divide. And I think that's it.
But I think it is the way Davos is bringing some very good conversations, and people are realizing. I think people have realized the so-called elitist club, so to say, which kind of people viewed it. They have realized. So when I look at it, it doesn't look like a zombie apocalypse that you're walking into people. People are ready to react. The socio-economic aspect of it is going to go more hand in hand versus a checkbox on CSR. It's going to be much more impactful. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think we're walking away a little bit more hopeful. We'll see what happens. We've seen interesting people on the street, from Mark Benioff to who do we bump into? Took a picture of Bill McDermott.
Bill McDermott.
Yeah, we saw Bill McDermott. We saw who's the actor that was walking out? Michael Douglas. We saw Michael Douglas coming out of a fitness store. So it's always fun stuff out here. So all right, well, hey, thanks a lot. This has been fun. So
yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing live news from Davos to Disrupt TV. Our audience really appreciates it. We look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. We have Steve Wilson, who's going to be on with us, and we'll talk more about future work, emerging technologies, and responsive and responsible leadership. Live from Davos, Ray Wong, Najeez Radif, thank you so much for joining us.
Live from Davos Wipro Pavilion.
Oh yeah, Promenade 63.
Promenade
If you want to come see us.
Yes.
All right, take care.
Come see us.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.